What is going on, everybody? In today's Power BI tutorial video, we're going to be covering some DAX functions. More specifically, we're going to be covering the DAX functions of SUM and SUMX. Now, if you've never heard the term DAX before, you may want to check out some of the Microsoft documents to help you out a little bit, but I'll go ahead and give you an intro. DAX stands for Data Analysis Expressions, and it also is used within Power BI Desktop to create aggregations and all different kinds of calculations using a formula-based language that's similar to Excel if you've ever worked in Excel before. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started on the topic for today's conversation. Let's go ahead and get started by working through the SUM function. What we're going to do is we are going to analyze that we have here the sales weeks going up all the way into the end of the year for 2010, and we also have the weekly sales data. So what we're going to go ahead and do is do a sum over the weekly sales data and be able to visualize this on the matrix itself. So what we're going to get started with is going to the table tools, and we're going to go ahead and open up a new measure. We're going to create a new measure. Once that new measure is done loading, we're going to go ahead and see that there is a pop-up here on the right. And if you've never seen a measure before, a measure is essentially something that resides on a table, but it lacks context until you give it to that actual measure. I'll go ahead and touch on that a little bit later, and it'll be a lot easier to understand once we talk a little bit more about SUMX. So let's go ahead and erase our measure default name, and we're going to go ahead and call this weekly sales sum. So the Power BI desktop itself should come with the IntelliSense to be able to fill out the function that you're going to be typing out. So for example, when I type in SU, it's going to already automatically fill a drop-down box of the functions that it thinks we're going to use. Here's the first one that we are going to use, and here's one we're going to use later. But let's go ahead and double-click on the sum, and it's going to ask us for a column name. The column name we're going to want to choose is on the same table, so our sales data fact table. Go ahead and double click on that, or you could type it out specifically. And it looked like I actually typed in the sales week on accident. So I'm going to go ahead and erase that, and we're going to want to do the weekly sales. Perfect. So once we're done with that, you can either close off the parentheses or Power BI will do it for you. But I would suggest once you get into the more advanced DAX solutions, you're definitely going to want to close these out on your own because it will create errors if you've got stuff following that. So go ahead and press the parentheses, go ahead and press enter. That's going to create this measure, and it's going to instantiate itself inside of our sales data fact table. Now, the placement of the measure, of course, does not matter. We can place it into a different table, and it would still work exactly the same because we gave it the context of referencing this specific column. So once we're ready to add our measure, let's go ahead and click on the matrix, and then we are going to slide our measure over to the values column, the values section of this. And then boom, we can already see that we have a sum that's going by date, and it looks to be functioning pretty well for us. Now, the difference between the sum and the SUMX is that the sum function goes over every single row if you just have it by itself. Now, the difference between that and the SUMX is the SUMX acts as an iterator, and if you've never heard of an iterator before, it essentially is going row by row, making sure that it meets the criteria that you've put. Now, the difference between the sum and the SUMX functions is that the sum goes over every single row if it's not given any context, for example, in a calculate function, which we're going to talk about in a different video. But the SUMX comes uniquely with a parameter for a filter or a table portion to be input into it, and also an expression to be put into it as well. So let's go ahead and start, and it'll help prove the point once I start this measure out for us. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing we did last time and press on the table. We're going to press on table tools, new measure, and once this new measure comes up, we're going to say that we want to get the weekly sales sum, and we want that for, let's say, store one. So we're going to have just a dash here, and then we're going to have for store one. So what we're going to do is we're going to start typing out our function. And as we can see, as we type out sum, it's going to give us all of these different functions. We're going to want SUMX. And as you can see here, it gives us an option to insert a table, or in this case, we're going to go ahead and insert a table filter. And it also gives us the opportunity to throw in an expression, which is essentially the column that we want to sum over. So in this first portion of the measure, we're going to go ahead and type in filter because we want to be able to filter our table just by looking for store 1. So the filter function is another function that gives us the capacity to look over a whole table to be able to pick one specific column or go over the whole table and essentially filter down to the specific items that we want by themselves. We need to throw this measure or this filter function a table. So first things first, we know the table that we want to deal with is sales data fact table. So we're going to go ahead and start typing that out and then go ahead and press enter. Next thing we're going to want to do, as it shows here in the IntelliSense, is that we're going to want to press a comma and then we're going to want to give it the criteria to search for. So what we're going to do is start typing out the store column. And what that's going to do is it's going to bring up the store column and we're going to want to set that equal to 1. Now, so I'm going to just start by plugging in the 1 and we're going to go ahead and close off this SUMX expression and then go over it. So the last piece of this expression or this function is that we are going to type in the specific column that we want to be able to sum over using our filter of the store is equal to 1 on the store column. So all we need to do now is type in weekly sales. Power BI is really good at the searching mechanism that's going to be able to fill out a lot of the columns. So even if you have a huge fact table with a lot of different columns, as long as you have an idea of the name you want to search for, you can go ahead and start typing it out and it's going to be able to search for you. So we know the name of our column, it's weekly sales. We're going to want to close that out. And if everything goes right, this should be able to show us the weekly sales specifically for the store number 1. Let's go ahead and check it out. So we're going to drag our measure down here below the weekly sales sum. And as we can see here, this is performing the exact calculation that we wanted to. We can see that we know store 1 only comprises of a certain amount of the total sales because we don't have the context in this matrix to specifically sort through the stores. This measure right here is giving us the capacity to look at each of the different stores by itself. And in this case, we just wanted to look at store 1. So just to wrap everything up, I'm going to go ahead and go over the SUM and SUMX functions one more time just to close out the deal for us. So the SUM function, again, we're not providing any context into any of the specifics. We simply want to sum up or add all of the values inside of one column, and that's what this is doing. And so for the SUMX function next, we're wanting to have some sort of filtering or some sort of table input that we want to apply over this sum to be able to decipher exactly the values of a specific category or a genre that you want on this table to be put in. So what we did was we filtered the sales data fact table only searching for a store equal to 1, and then we went ahead and input our column that we want to perform this sum over. And what that's doing is it's going line by line and it's searching for store 1. And every time it finds store 1, it's saying, hey, Power BI, add this value to the other values that you found for store number 1. And that's why we're getting this smaller value that's only associated with store 1 as opposed to our sum of the entire column. Thank you so much for joining this video. If you like watching Power BI videos on DAX, building data sets, or even report development, you're going to want to follow the channel because we do that here on Self-Taught Spencer. So feel free to subscribe and stay tuned for the next video.